Let me guess, you left Dragonwilds because it didn't have enough content, or maybe it didn't feel RuneScape enough. Well, the version we're getting on September 15th feels almost like a completely different game. And the first thing you'll notice is just how much bigger the world has gotten. At early access launch, you basically had the original playable regions and the initial story progression. And since then, Dragonwilds has added 3 major region expansions: Fellhollow, Dowdun Reach, and Umbral Sands. And importantly, these aren't just 3 open field forest. Each one of these pushed the world design even further. Fellhollow brought its own regional hazards with new bosses, new enemies, activities, and expanded the entire progression system. Dowdun Reach became a much denser, more story-heavy region with Black Knights, Zamorakian themes, and a different way to explore. And with Umbral Sands, they introduced desert survival mechanics, reputation-style progression, a larger enemy roster, merchants, the fight caves, and the Nightmare Crucible. And to top it off, with 1.0 dropping on September 15th, Scorn Wilderness will be added, which will introduce the first time ever raid, along with concluding the Coldra saga. If your memory of Dragonwilds consists of Brynmore, Gornfell, and killing Velgar, well, yeah, you've missed a bunch. And it's not just the map that has grown. Entire skill trees and paths didn't exist last time you played. Jagex has added 5 new skill trees to the game since the early access days, and those are Magic. Magic became a proper standalone skill with progression, spell upgrades, and utility. Ranged, full range progression have been added, bows, crossbows now in the game, abilities like snare, traps, enchantments, you name it. Farming, which has introduced crops, crop plots, disease, compost, watering systems, farming spells, and now feeds directly into food in the crafting progression. Fishing was added with a full 1 to 99 skill tree, which introduced fishing rods, fishing nets, multiple fishing tiers, and its own set of skill spells, and the newest one being the agility tree. This one introduced passive experience while traveling on foot, introduced agility courses, shortcuts, stamina improvements, carrying weight increases, an aerial dash, double jump, recall, and more. And on top of adding all of those skills, the skill system itself is much deeper. The skill caps have been expanded towards 99, and a lot of the trees have been backfilled as well, and skill capes are now officially obtainable for hitting level 99 in any skill. At early access launch, a lot of these Dragonwilds skills actually felt like a foundation to a system. Well, now these actually feel like good progression paths. But even if you kept up with all of the new skills they've added over early access, the way that you actually survive in the game has been completely changed. I would argue the hugest change relates to Wardstones and Ward Shields being completely gone. Instead, you now have one actual health pool that permanently grows through exploration. The devs have added these Constitution Shrines, which are scattered all throughout Ashenfall. You can see each of the individual regions have a selected number of these, and interacting with one of these will increase your maximum HP. To go along with these shrines, the food in the game has completely changed alongside it. The food no longer is just something to eat to keep your hunger meter and water meters full. It is now a major part of providing instant heals, healing over time, buffs, sustained survival, and combat preparation. So if you remember Wardstones being a huge part of survivability, well, completely forget that entire system. And while your survival got overhauled, so did the place that you spend most of your time between adventures, your base. At early access launch, you had to constantly go from your chest, inventory, to your bench, back to your chest, and repeat. Well, now they have dedicated storage, which means nearby storage can feed you everything from crafting benches and building. And then crafting itself also became more specialized. Instead of cramming the progression into a couple giant crafting stations, we've now got dedicated benches like the blacksmith's bench, fletching bench, the Mystic Forge, and armor bench, and plus additional things like advanced tannery benches, fermentation barrel, the lumber storage, ore and stone storage, and specialized gathering equipment. Your base functions much more like an actual production hub than it did before. Something else you'll notice right away if you haven't picked up on it for the clips in this video is simply your movement and mobility in the game. The developers have added a ton when it comes to mobility. Everything from 2 mounts being added, which are the Terrorbird and the Magic Carpet, with variations for each cosmetically. They've added the entire agility skill tree, which introduced things things like passive movement progression, lower sprinting stamina usage, higher carrying capacity, shortcuts, reduced falling damage, aerial dashes, double jump, recall, and more. They've also made some fast traveling improvements, things like reducing the cost for lodestones. The carrying weight penalty for fast traveling with a heavy inventory was reduced. On top of that, some general quality of life stuff was added, like auto run, improving the basic jump function to allow you to clear things you think you should have been able to beforehand. Movement spells have been added and tweaked or reworked, including things like wind step, being able to cast while you are moving without interruption. Getting across Ascension fundamentally feels completely different than it did beforehand. And speaking on things that feel different, we have magic, runes, and even combat in general just has gotten a lot deeper. Magic isn't just air does more damage, fire does damage over time. You've now got multiple elemental options, including water magic, healing support capabilities, crowd control, traversal, gathering spells, farming utility, and weapon enchantments, to name a few. Additionally, runecrafting itself was substantially reworked. Not only how you craft runes, but also they introduced anima events. These things exist all around Ascension, and they're just another way of converting rune essence into usable runes on the go without having to visit a rune altar. And combat progression has expanded through more weapon types, range systems, special attacks, masterwork and vestige weapons, including the ability to upgrade them via the Ascension mechanic, and weapon-specific progression. And what's crazy is it doesn't stop there, as there are new combat changes already in the works to launch here with 1.0 on September 15th, including introducing things like the ability bar from old school RuneScape and how that's going to manipulate and change everything we know currently. And honestly, Magic specifically deserves a video on its own talking about the different spells and utility options that players have, because I think most people are significantly underusing this or sleeping on the spells in the game. And speaking on all of that progression, it finally has some place to go, as Dragonwilds finally has true endgame content, as it has now officially introduced things like the Fight Caves, which is a repeatable challenge tied into a progression system with rewards, the Nightmare Crucible, which is a boss rush challenge activity, which is throwing difficult enemies at you for rare rewards, the Ascension mechanic, which will allow you to gather Ascension cores and will enable you to upgrade masterwork and vestige items to the highest tiers, and with 1.0 introducing the Scorn Wilderness Raid, which will push Dragonwilds even further towards actual repeatable and in-game group content. And beyond the bigger systems, there's a quieter change that might hit you the hardest when you load back into the game. It just feels more finished. The game's UI has been redesigned, they've added the spell wheel, hit splats have been added, the ammo and rune organization has been improved, the character recustomization option has been added, controller support has developed substantially, many more enemies and bosses, and substantially more gear and building options. Honestly, some of the biggest changes here aren't even things that you can put into one bullet point. Ascension just feels fuller, it feels much hardier, and feels way better than it did in early access, as one would expect. So if you've played Dragonwilds at early access launch and thought to yourself that you'd be coming back when the game had more meat on its bones, September 15th might just be the perfect excuse, because the Dragonwilds we're heading into for 1.0 is a hell of a lot more complete than the one we started with. So if you're coming back for 1.0, tell me how long it's been since you've played, because I'm genuinely curious on how much of this game you haven't seen yet.